As an architect, I always react to the places that I'm in, the rooms that I'm in. And this particular one has a lot of meaning for me, and also for my husband, John, because our 4 children went to the school, and we spent a tremendous time in this room. But more importantly, what resonates in this particular building is the mural that is out in the hall that you walk through and that you will see face to face when you walk out of this room. You see, that mural was the first assignment that I had, or nearly the first assignment, when I joined Michael Graves' office in 1977, 40 years ago. The Arts Council of Princeton realized that this building had a big blank wall. And they said, "Can't you do something about it, Michael?" And he said, "I'll think about it." And he kept procrastinating, so my job was to end that procrastination. And his job was to get on with it, to design something. So he made a very nice drawing, a beautiful yellow trace drawing about this big, speculating on architecture. It was a kind of a tangible speculation about what architecture is about, the scale of the wall, but also the scale of the person as you would approach it. And then we, the office, the members of the office, a bunch of us, maybe 12, gridded it out, painted it on the wall. And I'm so pleased that it's still here today for all of us to appreciate. Now what I'm going to talk about is, again, on the theme of activate. We've been talking about it all afternoon. And the idea of activating creativity in architecture and design, and how identity plays a role in that. And the mural, to me, is part of that, epitomizes some of that idea. Because it's not just about the design itself. It is about trying to stimulate the curiosity of middle school students in a very formative year of their lives. People often ask me how I became an architect, and it wasn't long after I was in middle school that I made that decision. Now, I made that decision basically on the fly. I stole it from a boy. I was 16, a senior in high school. He was a new boy from a faraway place. We were sitting on a bus discussing our futures, and he said, "I think I'd like to be an architect." And out of the blue, for whatever reason I know not, I said, "Yes, I do too." Never thought about it before. Seemed like a perfect match, but I had a good cover. I was going to apply to Smith College and study art history. Now that was an idea I stole from the boy the previous summer. And they also offered architecture. So that was a pretty good thing. So why a girls' school? I had grown up in a family of boys. I have 5 brothers, immediately younger than I, and a sister who was a baby when I moved out. I lived in a neighborhood of all boys, 12, no girls whatsoever. But in school, in the co-ed school that I went to, I regarded the girls as very, very smart and very athletic. So who wouldn't want to go to a school with very smart and very athletic girls? I certainly wanted to. I particularly was good at girls' basketball. Now, girls' basketball in those days was very different from basketball of today. We played 6 aside. Three guards, 3 forwards. One person could go across the line, but nobody else. And we only could have 3 dribbles. Now, I was the rover for the defense. I was the point guard because I could dribble that ball down the court in 3. So I go to college, and I think, well, I'm going to try out for the basketball team. I'm going to go to the open call. So I walk into the gym, and lo and behold, they are playing the boys' game. Now, the boys' game, they play 5 aside. The boys can go anywhere they want, all over the court. The boys can dribble as many times as they want. Yes, I think that is just the most fabulous thing I ever did. I'm in. So I looked around for the person who was in charge, and I went up to her and said, "Hi, I'm Karen. I'm a point guard." Now, I had been working on 5 feet for most of my life, and that wasn't going to happen right away, but you know, it changed my expectations, but that did not change my identity or even question it. However, other things that occurred in college did. So imagine, big assembly, weekly assembly, more young women in one place than I'd ever seen in my life. Very well-meaning man gets up and says, "Ladies, you should never consider yourselves second-class citizens. Second-class citizens. What's a second-class citizen? Who's a second-class citizen? None of us said we were going to be second-class citizens. No way. We had some help from some of the alumni, like Gloria Steinem, Betty Friedan. And in those days, it was the beginning of what's now called women's lib, growth of feminism. But it was also a time of great social change. We had equal rights, and we had civil rights, we had animal rights, we had the greening of America, we had the first Earth Day, the student strikes, the anti-Vietnam sentiment, and a lot of other things that eventually changed my ideas about creativity and architecture and design and what's important. And in architecture school, we also questioned the masters of modern architecture. We weren't going to let them just be the gods of the earth. There were other forces at play that we thought were most important. And this is Le Corbusier, one of the masters of modern architecture, well known, Swiss French. And he was very revered in some ways and very now reviled in other ways. Some of those point block towers that are considered projects are his idea. But when I was thinking about creation, I kept thinking about his book called Creation is a Patient Search. And that phrase kept rolling around in my head and rolling around. I kept saying, yes, creation is a patient search. So I looked at this book, which I hadn't done in a long time. And actually, the French title of this would have you translate it as the studio or the atelier of the patient search. And there he is in his studio in Paris, which I've actually visited, looking and studying and making his own ideas about architecture very patiently. Now, he was, like Michael Graves, an urban designer, an architect, an interior designer, a furniture designer, a painter, and a theorist. And he liked to bring all these things together. And I know from our own practice that that synergy is really important. And it really does lead to creativity and innovation. And so throughout his book, which he composed completely himself, it's a memoir, basically, published at the end of his life. He juxtaposed his sketches with built buildings, his paintings with interiors and furnishings. And this particular spread caught my eye because this is one of the most iconic pieces of furniture of the modern era. It's actually the first piece of modern furniture I bought for myself. It symbolized modernism. This one, the so-called LC1. There's also the LC4, which my husband happens to own. And so I got to thinking about this, but it really bothered me that this furniture in this book, all about him, was not designed by him. It was designed by her. Now, this is Charlotte Perrion. She had applied for a job in Corb's office, and he said, "We don't do embroidery here." And then he got to see her work, and he goes, aha, something's going on here. Steel tube furniture, lots of leather, very interesting. And then he hired her on the spot. So what's important about this is not whether or not he gives her credit for it, because that was somewhat of an issue, though not more later because of the branding issue of how one sells furniture these days. But the way that feminist art historians interpreted this photograph, they said that she had her head turned away from the camera because that was removing her authorship. It was obliterating her identity. And so her biographer, Mary McLeod, asked her in 1997, "What do you think of that?" And she said, "Absolutely not." She said, "I set up that shot. Corb wasn't even there. I was trying to sell the chair." So what I thought, and the idea of creativity, is that she was really part, like a lot of her male comrades in the practice, trying to boost the idea of modernity. That was a collective interest. It was something that they wanted to do, the spirit of the times, to raise the bar for everyone in the spirit of modernism. And so you have this dichotomy between Corb in his studio and looking individually at what he's working on, and Perrion and her friends talking about the collective. So that got me to thinking about creativity in architecture and the idea of identity. And I came up with this idea that there were really 3 different avenues to take this. And just for sake of memory, I call them the me, the we, and the all of us. The me is that individual contemplation. It's what we do every day when we sit down with our notebooks and we're trying to remember things and we're developing our ideas. It's really that creative search for your own identity. The we is collaboration. Now, I don't really need to talk about collaboration in the context of this because architects collaborate every day. That's our job. That's what we do. Because we work with engineers and lighting designers and acoustical designers making a solution, solving a problem for a client. And that interaction, that dynamic is actually very innovative and very creative, but again, it is our job. When other people do it, when other people in other industries do it, in other businesses, they all call it design thinking. To us, it's just our everyday life. Us, however, is the one that I think is the most interesting and the most promising. And that is the collective curiosity. And that's not just about coming up with the solutions. That's the one where we discover the questions. And when you start to discover the questions, you really have something that raises the bar for all of us. What struck me when I was thinking about what examples I could use, I couldn't come up with a single example where thinking about this collective curiosity did not improve the situation. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Stryker Medical is a transport company, among other things that they do. They basically own the stretcher market, so you see these yellow stretchers at athletic sidelines, you see them all over the hospital. But the one thing they didn't have in their fleet in the hospital was a transport chair that would replace the 80-year-old standard one that you always see. Now, the designers could easily integrate this into Stryker's fleet by using the same kind of wheel pattern, by using the same similar colors, some of the same vocabulary of materials. But the designers also saw they had some vicarious clients here. And among their vicarious clients were the patient and the transporter. The transporter walks 8 miles a day through the hospital. The transporter bends down 8 or 9 times to do this. The patient has to get in and out of this chair. And so what the designers did was they went and discovered that there could potentially be some other questions that were not being asked. And were there questions that could be raised that would benefit the hospital and the health of all the patients and everyone else in the hospital? Of course. They could look at the spread of infection. They could prevent patient falls. They could deter caregiver backstrain. They could solve these technical problems in the hospital by doing that. Different scale, similar idea. An architect named Bill Reed was asked to site some developer housing in a valley along the Teton River in Idaho. It was a valley that had been farmed for a long, long time and was rather messed up because it had been over-farmed with this row crop farming pattern. And what he discovered was that there was traces, not in the main river there, but in the traces that came out of the mountain of what's called an alluvial fan. Now that's just a big stream that comes down and it fire hoses out into the mountain like this. And he thought, well, maybe instead of getting special points for keeping those farms, because that was what the system would typically have you do, was there a way of creating new patterns of human habitat, activating the wildlife, activating the streams with the beavers that could come in and clean up the streams, and the deer and the flora and the fauna and everything. Could you really make this place much more healthy by these other means? Discovering these other questions, and yes, of course, the answer is yes. So finally, I think that there are these 3 things. The me, which is your own patient search for your creative identity. The we, that is the collaborative method for forging innovations by having multiple people solving the same problem. But the one that's the most hopeful of all is this collective curiosity, this us, all of us, the way that we can work to raise the bar for all of us. And thank you. But one more thing. So I went to one of those big decade high school reunions a couple years ago, and my friend Susie Moles, whose father was on the Olympic basketball committee, said, that one, the little one, best point guard we ever had.